The deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living a lie. I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening minds.
Happy Holy Day, Moors. Welcome to House of Reawakening Minds. House of Reawakening Minds exists to provide for the exploration and practice of spirituality in an enlightened community dedicated to honoring the myriad of sacred pathways to the universal creator. We are a holistic center for spiritual grounding, free thought, self-discovery, and Moorish science, an awakening experience for all ages. Tonight, I am pleased to present to you our National Grand Sheik, Taj Tarik Bey, as he presents Quo Warrantos are necessary to keep governments in check. But before he begins, please be sure to like, share, and if you have not already done so, subscribe to our channel. Now, let's receive Grand Sheik Taj Tarik Bey.
Islam, Assalamu alaikum, Shalom, Vadi Makum. We're going to talk about Quo Warrantos tonight because one of the things that we recognize as we talk to our people around the country, and many people call into the House of Reawakening Minds from other national jurisdictions from around the world, from the UK, from Germany, from China, actually from South America, etc. We want to state some fundamental facts that are necessarily needed, particularly here in North America, due mostly to the current events that are happening around the world and the nature of the economic collapse that's happening around the world, the nature of the deliberate constriction of basic supplies in trade around the world, causes and the nature of remedies in these matters, particularly when it comes to persons and people and beings who are controlling different agencies that are claiming authority that cause injury upon the people of the land, distinguished from what you would call a legitimate contractual obligation, etc. And because corruption has been so entrenched, particularly at North America, not only have the Aboriginal and Indigenous people of America been suffering, and economically, socially, and politically by such beings, such persons, and their private for-profit human trafficking agencies, etc., disguised and or guised as government, federal, state, or otherwise, etc. We're going to address again, as we said, Quo Warrantos and the necessity of Quo Warrantos to be a part of your everyday affairs to keep government in check. And the fact that the people have not been doing so has much to do with the negative conditions economically, socially, and politically that are taking place today unchecked. From a point of fundamental or elementary civics, when we go into the Quo Warranto principle, you'll have pretty much a cognate idea as to why so many people have been actually robbing, raping, and looting the people economically, absent of any redress by the people or any countermeasures made by the people to these people. And it has much to do with the fact that the people have not been taught the fundamental, we're talking elemental civics, and that is treaty and constitutional principles being enforced. Because keep in mind, the divine nature of life and the divine nature of right and liberty are divine and are not legislated, distinguished from privileges in any corporate capacity or any what you would call international law trade conditioned on trade issues and jurisdictional issues. And this is another reason why we've always emphasized with the people to get a clear comprehension of the levels of jurisdiction, the nature of jurisdiction, because it takes place every day in your lives, etc. And because these things have been neglected and ignored on multiple levels, many people have been suffering for generations unnecessarily, only because they have been fooled, tricked, robbed, misrepresented, etc., due to the fact of a lack of knowledge of jurisdictions and a lack of knowledge of Quo Warranto writ issued by the people to anyone who are claiming right over land, economics, authority, power, assumed power of attorney, etc., anything in that nature, and particularly with anyone, any man or woman who claims an office in government, an authority over a liberty, etc., in any political jurisdictional platform. Now, this is necessary because these matters have been neglected. And so we're just going to go in general and talk about this the issue of what the nature of a quo warranto is. And we're going to give it to you from ancient and modern jurisprudence. And so you keep in mind that the promotion of the principles of jurisprudence have been promoted around the world in a what you call a generally accepted platform known as international law principles, i.e., treaties, etc., constitutions. And I think that people in general, many people have demonstrated that they don't understand or comprehend or overstand or even understand the nature of constitutions. When you're talking treaties, you're talking constitutions. So keep this in mind. These are rules of law. And the quo warranto is in place in any structured government to assure that any man, woman, etc., operating any venue that claims right or authority or power of attorney over any national, any aboriginal, or any citizen of any political jurisdiction, that being is the rightful being, rightfully authorized, rightfully settled, rightfully placed, rightfully acting, due and controlled by the limited or delegated authority assigned by law to such man, woman, or person, etc., or organized agency of any type that's exercising any authority whatsoever. Quo warrantos are in place in the nature of both a delegation of authority order, a certification, and all of these things are bound or demonstrated by what is known as a solemn oath, which is demonstratable and is to be displayed and, as you would say, shown to anyone who challenges the jurisdiction of such persons who are claiming authority. So let's talk about quo warrantos in their nature. So we're going to go to Henry Campbell Black's Law Dictionary of Ancient and Modern Jurisprudence, etc. And you will find this also in your other law dictionaries, the nature of. Quo warranto. In Old English practice, a writ in the nature of a writ of right. So when you're talking a writ of quo warranto, you're talking about a writ of right. So look at that in the same nature. For the king, against him who claimed or usurped any office. Again, it is a writ that challenges anyone who claims an office or the right to any office, and for the most part, for those who have been suspected of, and usually it occurs, have usurped an office, who have usurped a franchise, who have usurped a liberty, and to inquire by what authority he or she has affirmatively and verifiably to support their claim to that office in order to determine the right. And it lay also in a case of non-user or long neglect of a franchise or misuser or abuse of a franchise, being a writ commanding the defendant, i.e., or the accused of the authority, etc., to show by what warrant he or she exercises such a franchise, having never had any grant of it, or having forfeited it by neglect or abuse, or forfeited it by misprision, or by treason, etc., or by
Let's see. Good.
we on?
Yeah, I think we are.
All right.
We just under attack.
Huh? All right. Now, excuse the EMS attack. So in order for the people to protect their divine sovereignty, which is divine and not political, remember the many politicians get upset whenever they hear the word the sovereign right of the people, because they know that the people have, by deliberate actions on the part of corrupt government, have not been taught the truth about the divine origin of sovereignty, and not been taught the truth that most governments have been so corrupted that they've been, by organization and by network, breaching the divine and sovereign rights of the people, and in via the authority exercised via government and government agencies, they have actually enslaved the people, have been robbing the people for generations, and then using the wealth that they've robbed from the people to actually increase the power in their different agencies to actually reinforce the subjugation of the people. And this has been the heavy practice that has been particularly exercised at North America, i.e. Morocco, and executed and exported around the world, etc., via network of the P2 Masons of the Vatican, etc., including many names of different families that you've heard of who have been controlling the economics of different nation states and using such powers actually to undermine the nations, which is what's happening at North America currently, and what has been happening in other nation states, what happened in Germany, happens in many nations in Africa on the east side, and many nations in South America. And many of you are familiar with the book called what's that? The Workings of the Hitman, the Hitman Chronicles.
The Confessions of an Economic Hitman.
Yes, Confessions of Economic Hitman, and all related information with the three-letter organizations that were set up by the Circle Church and Chancery, and also the Vatican. And people aren't aware of the fact that these three-letter organizations and agencies that have been actually plummeting or pilfering from the people for generations are in fact not at all legitimate government, nor do they have lawful delegated authority of operations. However, they've done so much damage to humanity that it is necessary not only for legitimate organizations of nations to come together to start correcting these problems, it is necessary for the everyday man and woman to start securing and protecting their birthrights, i.e. their sovereign rights, and make a distinction between privileges that have been artificially constructed to usurp birthrights, or what you call unalienable rights. That means rights that have no rightful or lawful lien capable of being placed on them. That would include your right to travel, that include your right to breathe, that includes your right to water, that include your right to natural resources, etc., all of which have been abridged and violated by people who have been claiming authority that they do not have lawfully, they do not have morally, do not have ethically, and never had governmentally. And thus a quo warranto is in place in structured government to keep such criminals and persons and peoples, men and women, who have been claiming power of attorney over the lives of other men and women, i.e. under the guise of government, to put them in check. So we'll go back because we had that electronic glitch. Quo warranto. In Old English practice, quo warranto is a writ in the nature of a writ of right. So, quote unquote, write these things down. Writ of right. Quo warranto, writ of right, they're the same thing. And so the writ of right for the king against him who claimed or usurped any office, who usurped any franchise, who usurped any liberty, and to inquire by what authority he or she has or possesses or can display, and this will be under the rule of discovery too, his claim or her claim in order to determine the right. And it lay also in the case of non-user or long neglect of a franchise, or misuser or abuser, or the abuse of it, i.e. franchise, being a writ commanding the defendant or the accused to show by what warrant he or she exercises such a franchise, having never had any grant of it, or having forfeited it by neglect, by abuse, by treason, by misprision, etc. The fact is already established that 90% or more of all persons operating in government at all levels at North America under the corporate offices of the bankrupt institution registered in Austria, operating from Davos, Switzerland, styled as the United States of America Corporation Company, is bankrupt, and those offices have been dissolved since 1933 officially with House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, etc. It is a known fact by all politicians that all of those persons who have been taxing the people, have been robbing them, who have been claiming authority over the people, have been robbing them, and have been committing crimes against humanity. And those who have been imprisoning people under the guise of governmental authority are actually human traffickers and had no authority to exercise such powers whatsoever. And they have been doing it for quite a while. And because the people have not been aware of the nature of jurisdictional powers, the nature of a delegation of authority order, and definitely not the nature of a quo warranto, which is put in place to check such beings, etc. And the nature of the right of that which is divine sovereign right of the people to reclaim their sovereign right that is limitedly via delegated authority, i.e., given or passed over for someone, man or woman, to exercise such limited authorities, which would be demonstrated and written in document form, their limited authority, the time of execution, the time of expiration, etc. And at such time that any authority is exercised absence of that delegated authority, such persons, man or woman, are committing crimes against humanity and are committing treason. This is one of the reasons why they don't teach the people about quo warrantos or the writs of rights, because they didn't want the people to know that the government operations on the federal, state, and city operative levels, the people have been operating criminal enterprises for quite some time to the injury of people. And also these principles or violations of these principles have been used by persons who are in fact private foreign human traffickers pretending to have authority over people. And they've been actually using different agencies such as family courts, human rights organizations, women's rights organizations, etc., municipalities, etc., to actually rob the people and to actually cause injury to people for generations, and they have never been challenged. And so we're going to talk about the quo warrantos. And so this is again why over the years we've always told people to learn and to study how to communicate with such persons who are claiming authority over your lives. And this is also why when you look at, as an example, when Prophet Noble Ali set up the old Canaanite temple in 1913 AD, etc., operating at North America, and he started a platform, both social and civic, etc., demonstrating for the restoration of the proper pedigree for the people of the land, i.e. Moors, i.e. the Moors of America, because we're all over the planet, to reclaim basic sovereign rights, etc. And those rights deal with the basic truth of their pedigree, and that they're Moors and they are not Negro, black, or colored, which are nom de guerre, which were created with connotative implications for the servitude operations of North America that have come under the classification of slavery and forced servitude. And this is another reason why the people have not been taught the truth about the nom de guerre of the branding systems and their operations in society. This is to really cover up the criminality of human trafficking that's been going on at North America for a couple centuries. And that's the truth. Including the fiction of the Emancipation Proclamation operations, etc., and manumission and the misinformation that is groomed and have been cultivated around these different legal terms relative to human trafficking and transfers of the authorities or jurisdictions over persons and peoples, etc., conditionally by people claiming to be government heads, etc. Now, when we talk about House Joint Resolution 192, that is only for you to get an idea and a knowledgeable foundation to comprehend that all the offices that have been operating at North America are actually dead. And therefore, not only have these people been criminally operative prior to that, they've increased their criminality even after that. And the interesting thing is that many people are not aware that these people are actually human trafficking and that they're committing crimes against humanity, etc. So we always tell people to read House Joint Resolution 192 in order to comprehend and to know that these politicians know that they're criminal. It's not something that they're not aware of. What we're talking about at this moment is not unknown by these politicians. It's absolutely known. The problem that we have is that it's not known by the general public. And so the general public have been out of, for a lack of consciousness and a lack of knowledge, actually funding their own slavery, i.e., and their own poverty. So the poverty that's existing at North America now, including the artificial inflation operations. This is real. Politicians are actually robbing the people and lying to them and telling them that prices are going up because of some political activity that's taking place in Ukraine or with Russia or with China, when it's actually the politicians here who, in fact, are not lawfully holding office, who've been robbing you and creating all these wars and profiting from them. And you have never challenged them because you didn't know about Quo Warrantos. And you've been going along with these criminals who have been sending quote unquote bills out to you, etc., in the name of governmental authority when they actually were robbing you. Now, because the courts have been usurped by members of the Crown, of the Circle Church and Chancery, of the Bar Association, etc., all of the courts that have been operating at North America have been really operated from Fleet Street, England, which most of you already know this information. We've been telling you this information for 20, 30 years. So most of you who come to platforms like this have already been aware of the fact that the operatives in government who have been claiming government authority are all de facto. All of them are de facto. But the principle of the Quo Warrantos would apply to your organizations too, or any organization that has any nature of civil activity where they collect or distribute or take finances from the people, etc., for some trade or benefit, etc. The nature of the Quo Warrantos would apply to them also. Now, as an example, for those of you who have studied the works of our illustrious Prophet Noble Dwelle and look at the bylaws, etc., of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science and adopted also by the Moorish Science Temple of America, and you see Act 1 of the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, the nature of Act 1 is in itself a statement that presents to you also the nature of a Quo Warrantos within it. As an example, when it talks about this Grand Sheiks and assistant Grand Sheik, etc., or the chairman and a moderator, etc., when it says they are put in power to make law and to enforce law, if they live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and it is known by the members of the Moorish Science Temple of America, etc. And the key, if that means if they have not upheld or been enforcing the law, etc., they have already breached their position and are in fact holding an office under color. Once you understand these principles of Quo Warrantos, you will be able to put your house in order relative to all of your organizations and why governments have constitutions in the first place. The constitutions are in place to secure the pre-existing rights of the people. Constitutions do not give rights. Constitutions are in place to keep government in check. Quo Warrantos are in place to keep people in government in check. When you fail to enforce the Quo Warranto, or i.e., fail to enforce the Constitution as declared by Noble Drew Ali, you are subject to all of these abuses that we have all been suffering. And so I'm going to give you another example of how to look at a Quo Warranto, right? As an example, for those of you who are familiar with fundamental civic principles, I'm going to read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations so that you can look at or have a nature knowledge of Quo Warranto and its necessary and its necessity in government and in order. And so keep in mind, when the prophet Noble Drew Ali set up the old Canaanite temple, the fundamental principles of proper government and for us getting back into those principles were taught by the prophet Noble Drew Ali via all of those adepts who were promising or committing or aligning themselves to help with the uplifting of the nation, i.e., including helping the people in government to clean up the mess that has been going on. So this is an editorial from the Moorish literature, and for you to study and also study the nature of Quo Warranto in order to comprehend our discussion tonight, because unfortunately, I know that many of the people who have listened to this venue and other venues like this, or any venue that claims nationhood or national authority of any type, nation this, nation that, whatever they've claimed, Quo Warrantos would apply to them. And I will read the editorial, A Divine Warning by the Prophet for the Nations. The citizens of all free national governments, according to their national constitution, are all of one family, bearing one free national name. Those who fail to recognize the free national name of their constitutional government are classed as undesirables and are subject to all inferior names and abuses and mistreatments that the citizens care to bestow upon them. And it is a sin for any group of people to violate the national constitutional laws of a free national government and cling to the names and the principles that delude to slavery. I, the prophet, was prepared by the great God Allah to warn my people to repent from their sinful ways and to go back to that state of mind of their forefathers, divine and national principles, that they will be law abiders and receive their divine right as citizens according to the free national constitution that was prepared for all free national beings. Repeat, prepared for all free national beings. They are to claim their own free national name and religion, and there is but one issue for them to be recognized by this government and of the earth, and it comes only through the connection of the Moorish divine national movement, which is incorporated in this government and recognized by all other nations of the world. And through it, they and their children can receive their divine rights unmolested by other citizens, that they can cast a free national ballot at the polls under the free national constitution of the state's government, and not under a granted privilege, as has been the existing condition for many generations. And you who doubt whether I, the prophet, and my principles are right for the redemption of my people, go to those who know law. Repeat, go to those who know law. In the city hall and among the officials in your government, and ask them under an intelligent tone, and they will be glad to render you a favorable reply. For they are glad to see me bring you out of darkness into light. Money doesn't make a man. It is free national standards and power that make a man and a nation. The wealth of all national governments, gold and silver and commerce, belong to the citizens alone, and without your national citizenship, by name and principles, you have no true wealth. And I am hereby calling on all true citizens that stand for a national free government and the enforcement of the Constitution to help me in my great missionary work, because I need all support from all true American citizens of the United States of America. Help me to save my people who have fallen from the constitutional laws of government. I am depending on your support to get them back to the constitutional fold again, that they will learn to love instead of hate, and will live according to love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice, and support our free national Constitution for the United States of America. I love my people, and I desire their unity in mind back to their own national and divine standards, because day by day they have been violating the national and constitutional laws of their government by claiming names and principles that are unconstitutional. And if Italians, Greeks, English, Chinese, Japanese, Turks, and Arabians are forced to proclaim their free national names and religions before the constitutional government of the United States of America, it is no more than right that the law should be enforced upon all American citizens alike. In all other governments, when a man is born and raised there and asks for his national descent name, and if he fails to give it, he is misused, imprisoned, or exiled. Any group of people that fail to answer up to the constitutional standards of law by name and principles, because to be a citizen of any government, you must claim your national descent name, because they place their trust upon issues and names formed by their forefathers. And the word Negro alludes to in Latin, in the Latin language, to the word nigger, and the same is the word colored, quote unquote, alludes to anything that is painted, varnished, and dyed. And every nation must bear a national descent name of their forefathers, because honoring thy fathers and thy mothers, your days will be lengthened upon the earth. And these names have never been recognized by any true American citizen of this day. And through your free national name, you are known and recognized by all nations of the earth that are recognized by said national governments in which they live. The 14th and 15th Amendments brought the North and the South in unit, placing the Southerners, who were at that time without power, with the constitutional body of power. And at that time, 1865, the free national constitutional law that was enforced since 1774 declared all men free, equal, and free. And if all men are declared by the free national constitution to be free and equal, since that constitution has never been changed, there is no need for the application of the 14th and 15th Amendments for the salvation of my people and citizens. So there isn't but one supreme issue for my people to use to redeem that which was lost, and that is through the above statements. Then the lion and the lamb can lie down together in yonder hills, and neither will be harmed, because love, truth, peace, freedom, and justice will be reigning in this land. In those days, the United States will be one of the greatest civilized and prosperous governments of the world. But if the above principles are not carried out by the citizens and my people in this government, the worst is yet to come, because the great God of the universe is not pleased with the works that are being performed in North America by my people, and this great sin must be removed from the land to save it from enormous earthquakes, diseases, etc. And I, the prophet, do hereby believe that this administration of the government, being more wisely prepared by more genius citizens that believe in their free national constitution and laws, and through the help of such classes of citizens, I, the prophet, truly believe that my people will find the true and divine way of their forefathers and learn to stop serving carnal customs and merely ideas of men that have never done them any good, but have always harmed them. So I, the prophet, am hereby calling aloud with a divine plea to all true American citizens to help me to remove this great sin which has been committed and is being practiced by my people in the United States of America, because they know that it is not the true and divine way, and without understanding they have fallen from the true light into utter darkness of sin, and there is not a nation on earth today that will recognize them socially, religiously, politically, or economically, etc., in their present conditions of their endeavorment in which they themselves try to force upon a civilized world. And they will not refrain from their sinful ways of action, and their deeds have brought Jim Crowism, segregation, and everything that brings harm to human beings on earth. And they fought the Southerners for all these great misuses. But I have traveled in the South, and I have examined conditions there, and it is the works of my people continuously practicing the things that bring dishonor, disgrace, and disrespect to any nation that lives the life. And I am hereby calling on all true American citizens for moral support and finance to help me in my great missionary work to bring my people out of darkness into marvelous light. From the prophet, Noble Drali. In the nature of the claim of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, you can see the whole nature of that movement is civic and for the restoration of constitutional principles, i.e., and that it must be known by all the people, i.e., all the members. And you see that those principles being duplicated in the execution or the legitimate operations of the old Canaanite temple and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science, which were registered as civic organizations. And then later in 1928, due to infiltration by J. Edgar Hoover and some other three-letter agencies to usurp the principles that Drew Ali has presented, he adopted a religious affidavit to help preserve the estates and the homes of Moors, etc., which have been used under the mortgage trickery to fund the United States Corporation Company that have went bankrupt and was actually using T-bonds to fund their private corporate enterprises around the world. And that practice has been going on to this very day. And for those who really comprehend the mission of the Moorish Divine and National Movement, you know at the heart of the movement is the enforcement of the Constitution. And you also know that people in all the organizations, including the Moorish Science Temple of America and in government on city, state, and federal level have been breaching their oaths to the constitutions and to the treaties and to the divine constitutional bylaws. Therefore, quo warrantos should be issued to all of them. And if any one of them have no track record of enforcing the Constitution, you already know that they have breached their oath to office. Quo warrantos are necessary to keep governments in check, and that includes all the levels of government. And it includes the fact that many people have been telling the people unlawfully and criminally, been telling the people that Noble Drew Ali never taught civics. And that whole document is a civic-natured document. And I suggest that you all write that down, write down civics, and then go look it up in dictionaries, law dictionaries, in any civic book, and it will tell you the civil duties or the relationship between governments and the people. And when the delegated authorities of such persons holding any office are breached, they have committed crimes against the people. And I say to you, I don't have to tell you that's been going on for generations. It's obvious to you. However, to help in the great missionary work of restoring the estates of the Moors of North America and restoring the divine rights to all of the people, i.e., which includes the hybrid Europeans who have been operating at North America, Morocco under treaty to restore their rights, etc., the enforcement of the Constitution must take place. And for anyone who has been claiming authority over the people in any manner should be issued authoritatively from the people a quo warranto, etc., proving their claim of authority, etc. Now, I also want to read to you what is known by all politicians operating at North America, from the city levels to the governmental levels of both the legislature and of the executive. I'm going to read some sections of the statements that were made on the House floor, House of Representatives, and to show you why over the years we've always told you to look at House Joint Resolution 192, break down every paragraph, and then do cross-reference research so that you would recognize the traitors who are among you, so you can start preserving the integrity of your families and your estates, because these very same people that you've been calling government have been overtly attacking the family structures with the intent of eliminating and destroying families and eliminating the lives of many people that they have actually breached, etc., who are not yet aware that the people who have been operating in government have actually been warring against you. Now, this is for you to cross-reference, and those of you who have been sharing with us at the House of Reawakening Minds for these many years know that Dr. G has been making available to many of you for your studies the flash drive, which we have much information that will keep you busy for over 15 years. And this document is also on that flash drive. And it's United States Congressional Record of March the 17th, 1993, volume 33, page H-1303. And one of the reasons why we've always we built certain fundamental information and shared it with people on the flash drive, because we know that there are many people among our own that were placed among us too, who are really anti-constitutionalists, but they disguise themselves as being different positions in the temples, in the different organizations, etc., and in government, pretending to be helping the people when actually they're enemies of the people. And for those of you who have been misled to think that this information that we've been sharing with you is not true, we're giving you reference so that you can go research it yourself And we've always made this information available to the people so they can cross-reference for themselves and recognize that people who have been looking them straight in the face, i.e. claiming to represent the Moorish Divine and National Movement via the Moorish Science Temple of America or via any government structure, or those who've been claiming to have authority over the lives of the people, who have been claiming to be congressmen, senators, i.e. or representatives or mayors or etc., you'll easily be able to tell that they have not only been criminally committing crimes against humanity, that they've been lying to you and they've been robbing you and then using your wealth to injure you and your families, including the bioweapons that they've been producing in Ukraine and that they've been shipping around the world. United States Congressional Record, March the 17th, 1993, volume 33, page H-1303, Speaker, Representative James Traficant Jr., Representative of Ohio, addressing the House of Representatives. Mr. Speaker, we are here now in Chapter 11. Members of Congress are official trustees presiding over the greatest reorganization of any bankrupt entity in world history, the United States government. We are setting forth, hopefully, a blueprint for our future, and there are some who say it is a coroner's report that will lead to our demise. It is an established fact that the United States federal government has been dissolved by the Emergency Banking Act of March the 9th, 1933, 48 statute, 1, Public Law 89-719, declared by President Roosevelt being bankrupt and insolvent. House Joint Resolution 192, 73rd Congress in session, June the 5th of 1933. Joint resolution to suspend the gold standard and abrogate the gold clause, dissolved the sovereign authority of the United States and the official capacities of all United States governmental offices, officers, and departments, and is further evidence that the United States federal government exists today in name only. The receivers of the United States bankruptcy are the international bankers via the United Nations, the World Bank, and the International Monetary Fund. All United States offices, officials, and departments are now operating within a de facto status, in name only, under emergency war powers, with the constitutional Republican form of government now dissolved. The receivers of the bankruptcy have adopted a new form of government for the United States. And this new form of government is known as a democracy, being an established socialist communist order under a new governor for America. And this act was instituted and established by transferring and or placing the office of the Secretary of the Treasury to that of the Governor of the International Monetary Fund. Public Law 94-564, page 8, section HR 13955 reads in part, the United States Secretary of Treasury receives no compensation for representing the United States. Gold and silver was such a powerful money during the funding of the United States of America that the founding fathers declared that only gold or silver coins can be money in America. Since gold and silver coinage were heavy and inconvenient for a lot of transactions, they were stored in banks and a claim check was issued as money substitute. People traded their coupons as money or quote unquote currency. Currency is not money, but a money substitute. Redeemable currency must promise to pay a dollar equivalent in gold or silver money. Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, make no such promises and are not money. Federal Reserve notes are not money. A Federal Reserve note is a debt obligation of the federal United States government and is not money. The federal United States government and the U.S. Congress were never and have never been authorized by the Constitution for the United States of America to issue any currency of any kind, but only lawful money, gold and silver coin. It is essential that we comprehend the distinction between real money and paper money substitute. One cannot get rich by accumulating money substitutes. One can only get deeper in debt. We the people no longer have any quote unquote money. Most Americans have never been paid any money for a very long time, perhaps not in their entire lives. Now, do you comprehend why you feel broke? Now, do you understand why you are quote unquote bankrupt along with the rest of the country? Federal Reserve notes are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Repeat, Federal Reserve notes, FRNs, are unsigned checks written on a closed account. Federal Reserve notes are an inflatable paper system designed to create debt through inflation, which is devaluation of the currency. And whenever there's an increase of the supply of money substitute in the economy without a corresponding increase in the gold and silver backing, inflation occurs. Inflation is an invisible form of taxation that irresponsible governments inflict on their citizens. The Federal Reserve Bank, who controls the supply and the movement of Federal Reserve notes, has everybody fooled. And they have access to an unlimited supply of Federal Reserve notes, paying only for the printing cost of what they need. Federal Reserve notes are nothing more than a promissory note for the U.S. Treasury securities, or T-bonds, known as T-bills, to promise to pay the debt of the Federal Reserve Bank to the Federal Reserve Bank. This is a fundamental difference. There is a fundamental difference between paying a debt and discharging a debt. To pay a debt, you must pay with value of substance, i.e., gold, silver, barter, or commodity. With Federal Reserve notes, you can only discharge a debt. You cannot pay a debt with a debt currency system. You cannot service a debt with a currency that has no backing in value or substance, and no contract in common law is valid unless it involves an exchange of quote unquote good and valuable consideration. Unpayable debt transfers power and control to the sovereign power structure that has no interest in money, no interest in law, no interest in equity, no interest in justice, because they have so much wealth already. Their lust is for power and control. Since the inception of central banking, they have controlled the fate of nations. The Federal Reserve System is based on the canon law and the principles of sovereignty protected in the Constitution and the Bill of Rights. In fact, the international bankers used a canon law trust as their model, adding stock and naming it a joint stock trust. The U.S. Congress had passed a law making it illegal for any quote-unquote legal person to duplicate a joint stock trust in 1873. And the Federal Reserve Act was legislated post facto to 1870, although post facto laws are strictly forbidden by the Constitution. Section 1.9.3. The Federal Reserve System is a sovereign power structure separate and distinct from the federal United States government. The Federal Reserve is a maritime lender and or maritime insurance underwriter to the federal United States, operating exclusively under admiralty and maritime law. And the lender or the underwriter bears the risk, and the maritime law compelling specific performance in paying the interest or premiums are the same. Assets of the debtor can also be hypothecated. Again, assets of the debtor can be hypothecated. That is to pledge something as a security without taking possession of it, as a security by the lender or the underwriter. The Federal Reserve Act that stipulated that the interest on the debt was to be paid in gold. There was no stipulation in the Federal Reserve Act for paying the principal. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear allodial title to property. Repeat, prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear allodial title to property, free and clear of any liens or mortgages, until the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 hypothecated all property within the federal United States to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, in which the trustees, who are stockholders, held legal title. And a U.S. citizen listed as a tenant and franchisee was registered as a beneficiary of the trust via his or her birth certificate. And in 1933, the federal United States hypothecated all the present and future properties, assets, and the labor of their quote-unquote subjects, the 14th Amendment U.S. citizen, to the Federal Reserve System. In return, the Federal Reserve System agreed to extend the Federal United States Corporation all the credit, quote-unquote, money substitute it needed. And like any other debtor, the Federal United States government had to assign collateral and security to their creditors as a condition of the loan. And since the Federal United States didn't have any assets, they assigned the private property of their quote-unquote economic slaves, the U.S. citizens, as collateral against the unpayable federal debt. They also pledged the unincorporated federal territories, national parks, forests, birth certificates, and nonprofit organizations as collateral against the federal debt. All has already been transferred as payment to the international bankers. Unwittingly, America has returned to its pre-American Revolution feudal roots, whereby all land is held by a sovereign and the common people had no rights to hold allodial title to property. Once again, we the people are the tenants and sharecroppers renting our own property from a sovereign in the guise of the Federal Reserve Bank. And we the people have exchanged one master for another. And this has been going on for over 80 years at the time of this writing, without the informed knowledge of the American people, without a voice protesting loud enough. Now it is easy to grasp why America is fundamentally bankrupt. And why don't more people own their properties outright? Why are 90% of Americans mortgaged to the hilt and have little or no assets after all the debts and liabilities have been paid? Why does it feel like you are working harder and harder and getting less and less? And we are reaping what has been sown. And the results of our harvest is a painful bankruptcy and the foreclosure on American property, precious liberties, and a way of life. And few of our elected representatives in Washington, D.C. have dared to tell the truth. And the federal United States is bankrupt, and our children will inherit the unpayable debt and the tyranny to enforce paying it. America has become completely bankrupt in world leadership, completely bankrupt in financial credit, and its reputation for courage, vision, and human rights. And this is an undeclared economic war, bankruptcy, and economic slavery for the most corrupt order. Wake up, America. Take your country back. United States Congressional Records. Closed records. Now, in the nature of the work of Noble Drew Ali as an example, and we've stated this for over 40 years to the people, and this is one of the reasons why in 1982, I set up the Order of the Round Table to get some of this information out, discovering that people who should have been telling our people the truth about this thing, that include politicians, and that includes people in different organizations talking about nation and nationality, were deliberately removing this information from the general public and deliberately not getting into this information because it would immediately show you that they are traitors. Now, keep in mind, within the congressional records, this is in the House Joint Resolution. Prior to 1913, most Americans owned clear allodial title to property, free and clear of any liens or mortgages until the Federal Reserve Act of 1913 hypothecated all property within the federal United States to the Board of Governors of the Federal Reserve, which the trustees, stockholders held title, legal title. And the U.S. citizen tenant franchisee was registered as a beneficiary of the trust via his or her birth certificate. In 1933, the federal United States hypothecated all of the present and the future properties, assets, and labor of their subjects, the 14th Amendment U.S. citizens, to the Federal Reserve System. Now, take that paragraph and recognize that Noble Drew Ali set up the Old Canaanite Temple, 1913. And all of the properties of the people, Moorish Americans, etc., were allodial until that counter move by the hybrid Europeans via the Woodrow Wilson administration. And from that point on, you could see the troubles that Noble Drew Ali was having with people infiltrating the Moorish Divine and National Movement, being against enforcing the Constitution. And what has happened is that many Moorish Americans have been what? Taken from their homes, robbed under the mortgages, etc., and thrown on the streets. And they're the people of the land and the true Americans. And their so-called leader guys have been promoting the 14th and 15th Amendment. Now you see why Noble Drew Ali spoke against that in the divine warning by the prophet for the nations. How many of these grand sheiks and so-called Moorish Americans who claim to love Noble Drew Ali make that comparison and show this information to the people? The reason they don't is because half of them are traitors. That's a fact. That's why they won't show you them FBI papers, which makes it very evident that the Moorish movement was infiltrated, i.e., by three-letter agencies. And this is why you see some of them people say Noble Drew Ali didn't teach civics. And this is why you see them send out shills and trolls to attack people like me who expose this truth to the people. And this is also why they're against the enforcement of the Constitution, i.e., and the judicial powers of the consular to protect these people and their rights, which should have been done by these grand sheiks, etc., according to Act 1 of the Moorish Science Temple of America. But they violated by the day. However, we do the best we can here at the House of Reawakening Minds to make the people aware of what's really going on with your economics, what inflation actually is, and making you understand that the United States Corporation Company is bankrupt and is not your government. They're private corporations or bankrupt who have been pretending to be your government, thus the necessity to issue Quo Warrantos to all of them. Take that. And that's for them trolls that I know them grand governors and others will send out to try to say that Taji guy has been lying to you when I'm showing you documented records. And they have this information too. And if you want to know why they ain't been teaching you, you ever heard the word treason and misprision of treason? Look it up. That's why you see some of the traitors among us have been attacking the consular venue, which is constitutional enforcement. Furthermore, I want to read to you from the Secretary of State up for the United States and their bankrupt platform in relationship to these Moorish Americans. And you'll see that these so-called people who love Noble Drew Ali won't teach you this either. But they'll spend a lot of time sending trolls out to the House of Reawakening Minds and anyone who deals with constitutional enforcement. This is relative to the citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. Page 459, Chairman, Charter, or Chapter 5, Temporary Provisions, Morocco. Keep in mind, this is citizens of the United States. Expatriation, Morocco. I want you to see it for yourself. There it is. So the United States is operating at Morocco. Mr. Phillips charged the affairs to Mr. Root, Secretary of State, August the 3rd, 1906. So Drew Ali set up the Old Canaanite Temple 1910, officially 1913. And this was 1906. So you can see 7 years prior, this issue was addressed, but it ain't made public. How come these grand governors and grand chiefs won't deal with this? Because it's called civics, and they are against constitutional enforcement. Their actions have proven it. They have been traitors to Noble Drew Ali, they've been traitors to you, and they've been traitors to the nation, period. American Legation, Tangier, August the 3rd, 1906. Sir, there are strictly speaking no Moroccan laws relating to citizenship of Moorish subjects in Morocco. The fundamental laws of this non-Christian country are based entirely on the Islamic code, and no part of which treats of the subject of citizenship. Page 460, Citizenship of the United States, expatriation, etc. There are, however, numerous treaties and conventions between the various Christian countries and the Moorish Empire, by means of which citizenship in this country is defined. But as I understand from the above acknowledged instruction that it is not the desire of the department to call for a report on such lines. They didn't want to make a report. I will therefore confine these remarks to general conditions existing which may possibly be of some use in connection to the information desired. Number one, citizenship in Morocco may be said to be governed by the laws pertaining to the same in other countries, with the exception that all persons residing in Morocco who cannot prove foreign citizenship or protection are considered ipso jure Moorish subjects. That means you got to prove that you're not Moorish subjects. So look up this, write this down, you all. Ipso jure, IPSO JURE. That means as the law stands. 2 and 3. Moorish subjects lost their nationality only by becoming naturalized in or protected by another country having treaty relations with the Moorish Empire. It was established by the Convention of Madrid, concluded July the 3rd, 1880. Now, the 14th and 15th Amendment that Noble Drew Ali mentioned in the Divine Warning is that issue that is addressed by Secretary Roots. And he said that's how they lost their nationality through the 14th and 15th Amendment. And don't anybody say that Drew Ali didn't address that, because he did. And them traitors among our own who've been enforcing the BS of the 14th Amendment, U.S. citizen slave codes of the Christian black codes, are them enemies of the people. Now, giving you the documents, go cross-reference what I just demonstrated and prove me wrong. And in the process, you'll learn the truth of your status and why you nationalize, and also why the Constitution, i.e. consular venue, must be enforced by Moorish Americans. Why? Because these principles have been breached by all parties. There you go.
So may I ask exactly the process of the Quo Warranto in order to, address this?
Yeah, the Quo Warranto will be in the nature, like because of time constraint, when we talked here at the House of Reawakening Minds about addressing, as an example, the IRS, and y'all can go back on the videos and look at that. That nature, the nature of that is a Quo Warranto. The nature of Act 1 of the Moorish Holy Temple of Science in the Divine Constitution and Bylaws, the nature of that includes the nature of a Quo Warranto. So what you're doing, you're challenging the authority that's claimed by anyone in office. And if they fail at any point to meet those principles, they have no authority, they have lost the office, and they are operating de facto, i.e., or you can equate the phrase de facto with traitor.
So there's a question as to whether or not a Quo Warranto should be issued to a clerk of court and so-called judge or magistrate to stop a case.
Oh, please. Absolutely. That's a standard. Now, when you all read the Divine Constitution and Bylaws for the Moorish Temple of Science, if that was enforced in that principle, you would recognize why Drew Ali put those rules in place to train us to begin, for us to practice and to become accustomed with the principles of fundamental legitimate government, and having a measuring tool by which to make judgment of both the internal affairs of the Moors and the associations of the Moors, and with our association with outside government, etc. That's why he talked about the nations of the earth, and he mentioned the different nation states. Therefore, when you're dealing with national principles, automatically the argument is always diversity. Please write that down. Diversity of nationality, i.e. Article 3, Section 2 of the Constitution for the United States, which all Americans and all Moorish Americans are obligated to enforce. All citizens and all nationals are to enforce that Constitution, i.e., and you will see the legitimate course that was set up. Now, as we read House Joint Resolution 192, you can see that these persons who are claiming to be judges are not Article 3. They are frauds. Their jurisdiction should be challenged all the time. And because they've been operating criminally, they are not judges. They are actually human traffickers. This is why, as an example, for those who know many of the things that have been going on across the country against our youth, etc., even people who have been claiming to be judges in Pennsylvania and Philadelphia have been trafficking teenagers for years while they have stock in the private corporations. They are not even judges. They're doing human trafficking. And our people have not been challenging them. They've been sitting around talking about it's racism. No, it's human trafficking. And you should have been enforcing that Constitution. Now that's the truth.
So,
a Quo Warranto, you would look at it in the nature of, say, write this down, an averment of jurisdiction. With an averment of jurisdiction, you would be doing also the nature of a Quo Warranto, because you would be demanding the proof of their delegated authority. And guess what? As soon as the jurisdiction is challenged, they can't produce it because they're not who they claim to be. Their offices have been dissolved. Now, keep in mind this also, too. It's a known fact that during the Eisenhower administration, we talked about in the civic lessons for years, and we've been attacked by people who claim to be grand governors of the Moorish Science Temple of America, who should have been enforcing that law, but they knew that the people were not aware of the civic platform of the old Canaanite temple and the Moorish Holy Temple of Science. They only talk about the Moorish Science Temple of America, the corporate operations, in order to hide the truth of the restoration of these people's lost estates. And they have been violating those bylaws, and they have been taking finance from the hybrid Europeans in the background, and they've been undermining the Moorish movement, guised under the color of law, claiming to love Noble Drew Ali. This is why you see, as these people are starting to wake up, you'll see a lot of so-called Moorish Americans attacking this information because they're among the traitors. That's a fact. Uncomfortable, but it's a fact. This is, again, why over the years we have been sharing with people on the flash drive proclamations, judicial proclamations, lawful notice, etc. Those in their nature are both restoration of a state nature, abridgment of jurisdiction, and quo warrantos in their nature. However, quo warranto would be direct. As an example, if these are some of the questions that you all need to learn to ask, and you need to start questioning these people because they've been screwing you over and over again. Like if somebody says that they have an authority, right? If somebody says they're a judge, the deal is you don't get into subject matter, you set the status. Status is always first. In any controversy of law, first issue is status. Second issue is jurisdiction/venue. Third is adjudication. They always jump to claiming jurisdiction and start adjudicating and didn't tell you that status comes first. That's why you don't see none of them talking about nationality. That's why you don't see none of them talking about constitutions and treaties, because all of them are criminals organized and they've been robbing the people. And the sufferings that we all have been suffering for these last few years is the evidence that we've been warning you of for decades so that you could help avoid this stuff. Now we're in the storm. Drew Ali said, there's a storm out there. The people say, I see no storm. Drew Ali said, there's a storm out there, right on. Now you all are in the storm. However, for the few who have been listening, we're trying to help you start reclaiming your own birthright, because believe yourself that your so-called leaders have sold you damn out. And so don't look for them to fix a damn thing because they don't intend to. They've been getting a benefit and kickbacks from it with their 501c3 skull and bones kickback fake agreement, acting like they're supporting Allah and supporting Jesus, etc., when they're really getting payoffs from the fake hybrid families who've been claiming a religion that they're not and claiming to be somebody who they're not, who have been destroying nations, etc., and you're now suffering from it, including their bio wars, etc. You should question all of them and don't follow anything blindly. So a quo warranto, say a magistrate, an administrative clerk, because remember they're bankrupt, so those offices don't exist. They've been dissolved. That's documented. I just read it to you. We've been telling you this for 40 years to try to help the people help themselves, to save you from what you're suffering from right now, including the fact that you're going to be stealing all your bank accounts. Are you, for the record, I object. Oh, you had your sneaks tied together on Thursdays, and that's a broken of the law, the city of the people fetcher, and the state of Pennsylvania doobie, and you can't do that, and so we're going to find you. They can't find crap. They're lying. You ask them, are you a constitutional officer? Oh, no, we need to talk about your violation of having your sneaks tied together. I object. Are you, and name the man, our constitutional officer? And guess what they're going to do? They're going to dance around it because they know they're not constitutional officers. They know that they're private, bankrupt corporations that have been human trafficking for decades. What you should be doing is thinking about enforcing the RICO Act on them, their asses, including all their associates. That's the truth. And soon as they don't answer, they're in default. Now, you have a right from your consular venue of enforcement of treaty law and constitutional law to dismiss the case. The power exists with you, and they didn't want you to know that. Yes, it does. So all your little clubs and organizations that you've been giving these dues to, who've been robbing you and keeping you passive while you got raped, that finance and that time should go to civic platforms to restore the estates of these people and the enforcement of the Constitution, because it has a divine side to it. It absolutely does. And guess what? It's not for sale.
I'm running this.
It's unalienable, meaning there's supposed to be no liens on it. You know, every time when you see the problems that our people are going through with all these fakeries, talking about they love Noble Drawley, they grand sheiks and grand sheikesses, you got a bunch of traitors around you. That's why they don't like Taji guy, because I won't play with him. And I ain't going to sell out with him either. So you can send all the trolls they want to send. But guess what? We're going to give you documents for you to research yourself, and we're going to give you basic comprehension on how to preserve your rights. Like the Prophet Noble Drawley said, help me in my great missionary work to bring my people back into the constitutional fold of government, enforcing our Constitution for the United States of America, because it comes from Muslim law. That's a fact. And Obama even told you that. So don't act like you don't know. And don't pretend that them politicians don't know. They only been criminal because you have been absent of your responsibilities to yourselves and to your families. Why do you think nobody likes Trump? Because he's been enforcing the Constitution. They try to act like he's the criminal. Don't get me started.
It's all right. I'm going to just see if I can find a question. Someone had asked whether or not going once a case has been heard or something going in. If you could use the Quo Warrantos and a non-pro tonque.
Now for then. This is even now. Remember you all around 85. We were doing some classes down South Canada, through the round table. And they had murdered a lot of the brothers and sisters in Philadelphia because they wouldn't submit to the mind control, MK Ultra mind control systems of the schools, and they wouldn't send their children to school. And this is with Pam and Ramona and them would move when they murdered them, because they wouldn't deliver their children to them, because they knew these people were human traffickers, and they bombed them, etc. Well, right after they bombed them, they issued an edict from the Philadelphia Chambers, a non-pro-tonque document, which we had been sharing with people for years, even encouraging the people to declare their nationality, and also telling them that they're, persons who call Negro, black, colored, etc., free national name, etc., your Moorish nationality. And that came from the Chambers of Philadelphia. And after that, you had many of the different so-called representatives issuing the proclamations relative to these people the right to claim their Elam Bay, i.e., because it's a birthright, i.e., Moorish Americans. And you'll see that a lot of people who should have been telling you these things long time ago in these different organizations claiming to love Noble Drawley, but they don't teach civics, see, should have been telling you that. And mean that for then, after they murdered them people, it created so much problem around the world, etc. That then they start talking about these people are Moors, etc. That's the non-protunct documents, etc. Which we'll bring to you in the future again, because it's not new. But what we need to do collectively, we're going to start talking Quo Warrantos as a standard of protocols. This goes for everybody, not just conscious Moorish Americans. This is why you've been losing your rights and your liberties. You have not been challenging people who are actually criminals who've been claiming to be government, and they're de facto. We've been telling you they're de facto. But we know, unfortunately, that a lot of your so-called leaders, etc., won't teach you these things because they've been benefiting from it from the background, getting kickbacks. And then they hide behind religion. Oh, I love Jesusness and Prophet Muhammad and stuff. And yeah. Well, once you start learning how government has really been operating, you yourself will start cleaning your house and putting your houses in order. But the major problem that I see with most of our people, they do not comprehend that most of the people that are around them that have been operating or running most of these organizations that they've been a part of are actually traitors. That's a fact. Quo Warrantos weeds them out. It does. Quo Warrantos are necessary to keep governments in check at all levels. This is why you remember when Consular General Lamont Mauricio was saying relative to people that want to become active on the consular venues, that one of the principles by which they will be vetted is that they must have a record, a documented record of constitutional enforcement.
Yes.
Mm-hmm. You know why? When they don't, you already know they're part of the dark side. And if they got titles, you already know they're colored and they're not your friends. And part of the reason we're having all these problems now with inflation and everything else is because of them that you have not been checking. As a matter of fact, they're spending more time trolling people like myself than doing the work. But they got them titles, don't they? They worry about Taji's title. It's funny.
Where you and how you got it.
It is funny. It really is. But they're only taking advantage of the fact that they are well aware that the masses of the people have been under mind control MK Ultra operations, and that the General Education Board set up by John D. Rockefeller and Frederick T. Gates family, etc., have been using animal husbandry training disguised within the curriculum. Now that's the truth since 1902. And so this is why it's difficult sometimes to get some of this information across to our people. They don't comprehend it because they think you're being against them when you're actually helping to liberate them.
Now, someone just told me something recently. I found it was interesting. Let me see if I can get it right. They were speaking, I don't know who told me this, but they were speaking about once you, when they talk about an express trust, and now I think I know, there be an express trust, and that some temples are getting, asking for information, in some cases, social security numbers and some other things, and taking the assets of the one who believes that they're, now it's protected, and they themselves have now assumed the asset of the member of the temple who has given them that information. Is that true?
This is what I say. Noble Ali set up a trust, as you all recognize. This is what I would say to you. Why are not these people teaching trust law to these people? The reason they're not, because it's civics, and they've been against civics. And I would say to you, get a handbook on wills and trusts study the principles, remove the bar association connection to it, etc., knowing that they are part of the barratry instrument constructors who have been stealing your birthright. This is why you must be competent yourself. And knowing that though some people were put in power to make law and to enforce law, they have been doing absolutely not that. So if they haven't been doing it, don't look for them to do it now, etc. Why? Things are. Let's look at what's happening to the nations of the world right now and what's happening in North America. For those of you, as an example, for those of you who eat seafood and stuff like that, right? I eat mostly fish. Anything that walks the land, I don't eat. If it walks the land, I don't eat it. However, this is one thing I noticed. Even though, like, basically, I don't eat most of them, but I do like Dungeness crab, right? Truthfully. 2 years ago, I go around the corner and I get Dungeness crab, and it was $9.99 a pound. Now it's $42 a pound. Does that sound like 7% inflation? Or does that sound like a couple 100% inflation? I was going through the Reading terminal yesterday, and I was looking at king crab, king crab legs, right? $59.99 a pound. That's $60.
One thing. What changed?
A leg.
What changed?
Huh?
And it probably got smaller than it was when it
Yes,
was not here.
yes. I was talking to a brother and sister the other day, and we were going in my. As a matter of fact, I was over my sister's house, right? So I'm remodeling my sister's bedroom, and we were talking about when we used to get gas and stuff like that. Oh, I remember when gas was like, wow, when I was going to school, gas was 36 cents a gallon. 36. That was the high test gas, right? And now what they got, like in some areas almost $7 in California in different areas. In other areas $5.99, and which is $6.
About
5, 9, 10. You know, there's
Delaware is $3.89.
Yeah, maybe we'll say six. But
Four.
The deal of it is, and of course they cheat you when they pump it anyway. So the deal of it is, people don't know or have not been aware that inflation is not really the actual cost of things. Inflation is really a cover word for corrupt government to rob the people under the guise of things are going higher in taxes. And keep in mind, these people ain't even really government. They're private corporations that had a government platform that went bankrupt, that aren't even supposed to be operating. And not only that, they're taxing the people and robbing them, and then using the tax finance to set up agencies, calling them government, and then continuing to rob and to tax the people. That's the fact. That's why you see a lot of the so-called Grand Sheiks and Moorish Science Temple of America and other people who are associated mad at me for years, mad at Lamont and anyone that activates that constitutional conventional constitutional activity, which is the law of the land supreme, and enforcing that consular venue of diversity of nationality, but yet they're passing out nationality cards. They're actually treacherously in breach of their offices. But the people who don't know civics don't know that. I know that. Why do you think I set up the roundtable in '82? You think I didn't know what the problem was dealing with? I studied what was happening. I know it's traitors all around. And then they set people around you to act like they want to help, but they really come to undermine. And after a while, it works its way out, but they must show themselves, because eventually they got to admit that they're against noble drawly and against constitutional enforcement. That Constitution don't involve us. Yeah. And then they charging people a lot of finance and everything, and their little club things, making these people think that they're lawful because they say noble drawly every 2 minutes and stuff like that. Yeah. But the people are waking up. This is another reason why over the years we just shared this information with people on flash drive, give them some kind of foundation that they can. And we all also tell them, say, don't accept what I'm saying. Prove me a liar. But do it sincerely. Then as soon as they do research, they'll find out we've been telling these people this stuff, the truth, for years. And these people who have been playing you, who've been acting like they're for the liberation of our nation, and they was talking about nation this and nation that, and then don't teach nationality, which is civics. An intelligent person recognizes that they're traitors. However, because things are starting to collapse all around everybody right now, you don't have the liberty or the options or the luxury to keep on pretending that you don't comprehend what's going on. Because guess what? If you don't get aware of a lot of things and get active, like Drew Ali said, I want active Moors, not passive Moors. He said, if you're not going to carry out my law, you may go back to the state where I found you. Because the corporate state been what? You've been their stock. And they've been liquidating your estates. And those of us who have not carried out the law are going to suffer the consequences. And it ain't going to be generations coming. You're going to be experiencing it now. We'll be able to talk about it tomorrow and then next week. And many of you who think you're half secure today won't be secure next week because you have not enforced that Constitution like the prophet said. However, again, like I said, we're still breathing. We still have an opportunity to do something. Get the flash drive from Dr. G. Get your foundation. Start studying. Enforce the Constitution. And within the enforcement of that Constitution, a quo warranto is a standard of protocol that has not been taught to you. We'll deal a little bit more with this in the future to give you some examples.
I would just like to add, and I had it running a few minutes ago, and if you could endorse this, Brother Yakuba J. Rome Ale, who you spoke with earlier, is doing a free civics class that is very, getting a lot of very high praise from those who are going, who are attending, online. You will not be here on the first Friday of next month, but Brother Yakuba will be,
Good.
And I want you to encourage.
Oh yeah.
For those who are listening, if they did not hear him when he was on office hours, they really need to. The first, it was a little over a month ago, but they really need to attend this because he's going to. Very seldom do I put anybody in your space, and you're going to be out of on a much needed vacation, but for civics and working on some of the solutions, that problems that I see that they're putting in here. They're working on stuff like that. So I'm hoping that they will attend that live stream on the first. Even though you're not going to be here, I think they're going to get a treat when it comes to information.
And again, Dr. J, because you already know we family and everything, but I have to be down to earth about this thing, and I got to give you your props, for maintaining this platform and having a variety of people with knowledge to come on the show, and also expanding because of demand and the need, official office hours with Dr. G to bring people on, because so many people who should have been telling our people the truth about what's really going on with the human condition have breached their honors.
Right.
And have been spending more time attacking people who've been doing the work than they have doing work at all themselves. But they got titles and they've been taking these people's finances. However, when, how do you say, an educated citizenry is hard to enslave? Something like that. Well, guess what? We're going to do the best we can here at the House of Reawakening Minds to give you primal information, but we expect you to invest in yourselves, because the history has shown that people who have been leading these organizations have pretty much been lining their own pockets, collecting trophies, going on trips with Jesus's half, and promising the people, delivering absolutely nothing. And the problems of the people have become worse and worse and worse. And our families have been broken up successfully by these hybrid operatives, etc., faking as government. And they've been trafficking our children, pretending that they've been trying to help our families. And people know it and have not been countering them. Quo Warrantos are necessary to keep governments in check. Now, the fact of the matter is, you haven't had any government operatives here, truthfully, because when what you have is organized criminals who've been robbing the people under the guise of government. Guise of government is not government, just like a guise of contract is not contract. An instrument that implies contract but fails to meet the rules that govern contracts is not contract. Contract therefore creates no obligation. A color of law activity or color of office activity creates no office, creates no authority, creates no obligation. Keep that in mind. So when you're dealing with these people who are administrative clerks for a bankrupt corporation of operatives who've been pretending to be government, when they issue any claims or issues, etc., authorities or edicts, summons, etc., keep in mind they have no authority to do so. The authority belongs with you. You haven't been exercising it. And this is again why over the years we've been always, enforcing people or encouraging people to activate Article 3 courts themselves. The people are the government. Recognize that. And for those of you who are confused a little bit about Noble Ali's position, read chapter 29 in the Circle 7 Quran. That'll give you an idea about the sovereignty, etc., that a lot of these grand sheiks are condemning. It will expose them too. Tough cookies, y'all. Truth is rough, ain't it?
Excuse me.
It ain't always pretty, is what it is, what it needs to be said. Egos and truth don't mix. Anyway, so Quo Warrantos, we'll get into that. So deal with this: averment of jurisdiction, delegation of authority order, Quo Warranto, and study them together consistently and redundantly. Read the divine warning by the prophet for the nations, consistently break down every paragraph. Use your Bouvier's law dictionaries and your Black's Law Dictionary to research all phrases that you're not familiar with. Keep in mind they are used every day in government or in operative trade. So get used to it. The deal of it is that people need to know that law and civics and history goes together.
So you said the averment of jurisdiction.
Averment of jurisdiction.
And what else?
Delegation of authority order.
Okay.
And Quo Warranto. Look at them together. And some of the things that we mentioned today: allodial, ALLODIAL, versus feudal. And be very clear on that. De facto versus de jure. Be very clear, because that's the nature of our conversation tonight. In other words, like this: see, the Quo Warranto exposes imposters, exposes pretenders, exposes frauds, exposes traitors. However, it has not been used by the people because they didn't know about that. So we're telling you. And once you get a clearer comprehension of their purposes and their means, you'll recognize that most of your organizations that have been robbing you for years and haven't produced anything, that you will understand why Noble Drawley did the additional constitutional bylaws in the back of the questionnaire, and you'll recognize exactly why he did it. And again, Quo Warranto. because it's the nature of what we're discussing.
Will you be actually giving any direction as to how that should be constructed, or is that another
We'll go
thing
in
that
that into the future.
Okay.
We'll give them examples. So whenever someone claims authority over you, you would ask them, are they a constitutional officer? And you would ask them to produce their delegation of authority order. That would be their license. Then you would ask for their surety bond, and that's supposed to be on display. You know, like if you go to a restaurant or something like that, and you see a certificate up there that says, Vivo Fashion Restaurant that sells taco burgers, and we're clean and stuff like that, and we were examined and blah blah blah. Well, that's a Quo Warranto. If you see a commercial shipping activity and they ask for shipping logs and authority to go to certain ports, that's a Quo Warranto. The Quo Warranto is always conjoined with a surety bond, always. In layman's terms, for a commercial activity, it would be called license and insurance. In a commercial activity of privilege, not of right, of privilege. That's a Quo Warranto. You know, like say if someone's traveling for a corporation across the highways and they have a big trailer or train and stuff like that, and then you would see maybe state inspectors or something like that stop the vehicle and weigh it and ask for the log records and the license and bondholder, etc. The nature of that is a Quo Warranto. They're always asking you for licenses, insurance, aren't they? But you never ask them for their Quo Warranto and their bondholder or their surety bond. Most of their surety bonds is usually Wells Fargo carried on the travelers and stuff like that. And so whenever any of these people are claiming authority over you and stuff like that, they start questioning you. Because remember, they're questioning you. That's a search. You ought to answer them damn questions. When you deal with the Constitution and you deal with Fourth Amendment, etc., that's a Quo Warranto. Sworn affidavit by or a warrant issued by a competent, i.e., Supreme Court competent judge, then that would be in its nature a Quo Warranto. And guess why? That's why they do stuff to people and don't produce them instruments, because they're organized criminals and the people thought they were government. And they've been raping these people for decades successfully, because they didn't even know that these daggone people claiming courts, they're really commercial human trafficking venues. They're not courts at all. At all. And don't call them judges because they're not judges. They're administrative clerks for a bankrupt foreign human trafficking company known as the United States Corporation Company. Bankrupt. Run from Davos, Switzerland, by some people who are claiming to be Jays and are not Jays, as demonstrated in the book of John 8:44. That's the truth. And then you have people among our own who have been working along with them secretly. 32 and 33-degree Masons got a Moorish fez in secret. And that includes all your civil rights preacher guys who turn around and call these people black, knowing that they're Moors. But they go to lodges with Moorish names. And they know what that fez is, crown of the sun. And they've been working along with Rome, raping you, and got a 501c3 skull and bones kickback agreement saying, well, the reason we don't pay taxes and stuff is because we working for Jesus or the word of the Lord. Lying their asses off. the Lords of London is who they work for, Circle Church and Chancery. That's a fact. Ugly truth, factual. That's why they're so eager to attack people that talk Constitution and cultural venues of diversity of nationality. They get all hot and heavy about that, don't they? Mm-hmm. Well, guess what? As the people learn, the people will get them in order. We ain't got to keep arguing with you because they're doing a lot of stuff to you all right now, including getting into your crystal stream to change your DNA. And don't think that they're not, because that's exactly what they're doing. And they're making claim on the body and the soul. That's the truth. How come your leader guys ain't enforcing the law? And how come it's not known before all the members? Y'all better get your house in order, because you're going to pay a dear price. You're paying it already. But the deal of it is, what we've been warning you of for years and years and years, you're in it already. So let's, for the few who want to help fix this thing, let's cooperate with each other and help uplift fallen humanity and stop the BS. Anyway, thank you for sharing this evening with us at the House of Reawakening Minds. And again, and it ain't biased, I give Dr. G props for maintaining this platform so that people, free thinkers, can come on a platform and not be constricted or violated constitutionally by fakers who've been claiming to really care for our people, and we know that they damn don't. However, we're getting some work done, and thank you, Dr. G, for your great efforts and your work. Have a good night.
Okay, well, I just like to say thank you to those who are really learning from you and who call House of Reawakening Minds to let me know how much and how important the classes have, the civics classes have been, and how it's opened their eyes and how it's changed, how they operate. And you just don't know. It gives me the opportunity just even recently to start connecting different Moors together that I, feel in my heart really have learned and then have gone on from what they learned from you and to further study, further research, and they really have something, and they're really concerned about those who just want to sell packages and things. They really want to train and teach the people. And so now they're beginning to get connected to one to another so that, when they do come out to the major public, it'll be a united front,
Yes.
And that this knowledge is, and so we're looking forward to, as soon as we can clear the dates, having some serious in-person classes and training.
We can go in the future, and what we've done over the years in different parts of the country, we can do here at the House of Reawakening Minds, have a convention and bring some serious heads together.
There are some out there.
And, for those who want to, do some operative tools, we can do that. And again, like Drawley said, he said, every temple must, he didn't say maybe, every temple must have a school. And that's one of the major things that they breached. Then he would say, Drawley said, our own press is the most powerful weapon in the hand of our group today. And you already know they tore down this press. You see none of them talking about no press, no newspaper. As a matter of fact, they're against it. That tells you who you've been dealing with, y'all. Read the FBI papers, and it becomes obvious why we haven't made the progress that we should have made decades ago, generations ago. Then you'll understand the problems of what is called the great sellout that nobody talks about in detail.
Okay, so we'll see you back here in about a month. But we will be back on the first, I'll be back on Tuesday, but on the first Friday of May, we will have a civics class, and you don't want to miss that. You want to, make sure, just because you won't see Grand Sheik's appellation there.
We're getting the work done.
Yep. You want to get the work done. You want to get some solid, open your eyes even further knowledge and information, and you're going to want to tune in on that first Friday and get that. So again, thank you. We thank you. We appreciate you for your support and for your patience when things go wrong. Until Tuesday, I'll be back.
Yeah.
And in a month, Grand Sheik will be back, but we will have classes, and we will let you know when we have our next up close and personal, or our next our first, I guess you want to call it. We're going to do some private sort of classes, and it's only for the serious, only for the serious. So we appreciate you. We on out. Is that it? That it, Grand Sheik? You finished. You said.
Yeah.
You said that's it. Okay. So we're gonna let me put this up. We're gonna go out with this. You don't have to go out with my choke berry. So thank you all. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Dr. G, inviting you to get your Chokeberry Plus today. It is that amazing berry, high in antioxidant, anti-inflammatory, antiviral properties. It supports and balances the blood pressure, the blood sugar, weight, and cholesterol. Yes, you can get a 2-month supply today by texting CB3L to 302-345-0500. That's CB3L to 302-345-0500. And get on the path to wellness today. You'll be glad you did.
Deeper and deeper I go, I find what it is I should know. 'Cause it's just a matter of time that you'll reawaken your mind. Oh, come with me, come to know and find out what is true. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living the life I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening mine. Come to know and find out what is truth, yes. Then you'll know what's in store just for you. No more living the life I can look to the sky and say, I'm reawakening.